pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, here's Dr. Cleefish's favorite part. The Tri-Creek School Corporation of Students, Staff, and Community endeavors to be a recognized leader for high achievement and exceptional growth. Innovative and equitable approaches build upon strong community pride and provide all students with well-rounded educational experiences for future successes.
Congratulations.
Let me see your hand. Let me see you get right about that.
Bravo.
So,
Very nice.
I dare members of our team for me to pass the baton and someone else take the spin at the opening of our meetings until they get it just right, and then they pass the baton.
I cannot accept that challenge.
We're accepting volunteers.
A wild talent, me.
I volunteered, Deborah.
Yep.
Do I have a second?
She would get it too.
Okay, perfect. And then our mission goes with,
For me?
yeah.
Okay, engaged to learn.
Equipped to achieve.
Empowered to succeed.
All right.
Alrighty, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Is there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Nope. Alrighty, opportunity for public comment. Don't have any. Superintendent's report.
All right, so first out of the gate, you know that schools are no longer allowed to charge for curricular materials. We're starting to get some additional feedback to that. You'll recall at our last meeting, we approved fees for locks on lockers and PE uniforms. There's, even though the state has been tight-lipped, there's some legal advice that's starting to come out that might give indication that we can, or we are allowed to pass on the expenses for items that kids will take home. So if you remember the old term consumables, those may very well be in play. So consumables are big in welding, construction trades, perhaps even in art class. Kevin, Dana, is there anything else that you would add to? We're kind of in this flux. We don't know how this will go, if in a couple of weeks we will be recommending that we pass on those fees that are allowable onto our families, or how we're going to handle that. What else would you add?
That's really it. I think that what we got from the legal team, which was actually the FAQ for a number of the items, was like, and consult your legal consultant, or consult local legal authorities for some of these. I can say that I've reached out to the generic email address that they created when the fees change came to be. I haven't had a single response. I imagine they're inundated at the DOE with probably a handful, if not less, people trying to field questions from around the state. So none of mine about our CTE classes have been answered, because we do wonder things about like the jackets that the kids have to wear, because are you getting very close to like a uniform there? And is that actually delivering the curriculum? Is that a hardware or not? So that's where some of this language where they specifically cite art classes, sewing class was one of them that we saw in there, but also speaking to like materials and CTE where the product goes home with a student. So that was brand new language that we just saw Tuesday of this week.
I know there's a lot on social media, confusion from parents, especially elementary schools, questioning, what do they need to pay for? And they're hearing rumors circulating that they don't have to pay for books. And they were happy about it, but there was clarity needed, so maybe
We've been holding off on that clarity
Yeah.
because we honestly don't know.
Okay. Well, just so you know, it's out there. I'm sure you do.
Yeah. Yeah, there have been several articles in newspapers, but even then it's the new things that are coming to surface. It's like no one knows what to do.
Well, we gotta make a decision soon.
Yep. So today's July 27th. We still have another week or so that we can sort through that.
Okay.
And if the board decides at the end of the day, we're just going to eat the cost this year, Can we do that would be the first question. Are we smart to do that is the second. And then third, will we or will we hold off?
I think the parents are happy that they don't have to pay for the books and the other things that are excluded at this point. But, you know, the other take-homes, I think we need to be responsible, to have the parents responsible for that.
We have to define in-house what exactly is that, and right now we don't know. The next item on the superintendent's report, if you can take one and pass it down. So this comes from our Northwest Evaluation Association that's referred to, or measure of academic progress. So people refer to it as NWEA MAP. And I've made a couple of handwritten marks. This is our kindergarten through 8th grade data. Those are the grade levels that take the MAP assessment. It's responsive to a kid's particular performance level. So it's an adaptive test. If a kid gets a correct response, then it will up the questioning rigor. If they start to get it wrong, it will adapt and fall down, and then it scientifically will land in a particular area, and it gives educators a good measure of where kids are regarding academic growth. We take this test in the fall, the winter, and again in the spring. Schools will analyze the data results from fall to spring to measure academic growth. So regardless of where you are on your achievement level, you could be a low achiever or a high achiever. This test will say, okay, we're not looking for a finish line for you to get across, a benchmark to say you passed or failed. We're just measuring your growth. So we established a district goal in our district, and I'm going to defer to Kevin. That goal was
70%.
which you see written there. And you'll see that in every grade level, the percentage of students who met their individual growth goal exceeded 70%. So that's huge celebration.
You should have this up on the screen.
Um,
I can see it.
I'm being a little tight-lipped with this because part of our first day with staff, we want to celebrate kind of together, and then we'll share it with the newspapers, and then Kevin's going to actually come around and do a district report, maybe September, October, to let you know that tour when the schools came around during the winter. We now have definitive results. So he'll be working on that when he gets that together.
The numbers are impressive.
So the second item that you'll see there is reference to school conditional growth. And because I don't like to do all the talking, Kevin, would you like to explain what that means and why that's kind of the first places we go to take a look?
Yeah, so whether you're a high achieving student, low achieving student, or right where you need to be, it's a really important column because you always want to grow more than your peers. So when NWEA looks at all of the students that have taken their assessment, you get placed into that scale that Mr. Anderson was talking about.
And this is across the nation.
The nation, millions, right? Norm referenced by millions. So if you grow like every other kid like you, you're at that 50th percent of conditional growth. That means you're growing as we would expect you to do because you're right there in the middle. What we want to see is we don't want to grow just where we're supposed to be. We want to grow at a far greater rate. That's especially important when we look at kids who are multiple grade levels below, because they can meet their growth goal, but never ever start to cut into the gap that exists for them. So for those types of students, the middle of the road students, and even for your high ability students, you want them to exceed that and far exceed it. So when you see numbers there from fall to spring of conditional growth, 50th would have been where they expect that cohort of kids to be with their like peers. You see conditional growth there with 91st percentile being the lowest and 99th percentile being the highest.
And the majority.
And the majority. I can be honest with the board that our winter math results came in MAP, and I contacted NWEA and said, there's gotta be something wrong. Our kids' growth is through the roof. And they went to their engineers and said, is there any way that it could be possibly reporting wrong? They're like, no, it looks good. So there was a little quiet trepidation on my part when spring was gonna come up, so like, could we ever sustain what we started to see in the winter? That school conditional growth percentile, validates that what we're doing with our math is growing those kids, not like their peers, but far beyond, which is not just closing gaps for the lower, but increasing gaps for the other. I shouldn't say gaps, widening from their peers. So it's a really promising, it's one of those like columns that oftentimes you just want to see what percentage of my kids met the goal. That one can often be more telling as you start to see the impact of that for a cohort or even an individual kid.
This is great. And I like this test because it also allows you to see, like I was able to see with Titus, if he was like stagnant in his growth because it's done, throughout the year a couple of times. And there were times when he was stagnant, but it then did show me that he was developing and growing beyond. So I really appreciate this testing and these results as well, because I'm sure that the teachers can use it to not just make sure that our kids are achieving what the state standard is, but if we already have that, to have that opportunity to take them past, and that's what this is showing too. So that's really good to see.
And to kind of translate to the graphic, I should have started with that. As you look at this, what we call the diamond report, the diamond itself, the middle of it, is what that expected growth was to be. So every time you see the bar, which is us, above the diamond, that's where you see how much it's exceeding what was expected. So to intersect the diamond perfectly would be just to meet your growth expectation. Everyone above that is representative of how much they are above it.
That's great.
So, it's never all about the test, right? A test is a part of the picture. It's the only way that we have to measure what we're doing in Tri Creek when we talk about our guiding principle, continual improvement. Like, how do we perform compared to others? This is a nationwide norm reference comparison. So now if we come back to just Indiana, how do we compare? So the iLearn results have come out from this past spring of 23, and we have been able to get our results and compare us to others across the state. I've circled the top ranking schools, and in the blue, you see the ELA, English Language Arts rank, and if you go to the far right column for the corporation, we are now ranking in the top 11% in the state out of all school corporations. You'll see that in math, we are now in the top 11%. And then you can see the next, when it's combined, the top 11%. We gained 2 and 3 percentage points from our ranking last year. And then you can see the other science and the social study ranks. So again, some kind of a snapshot of good news. This is on our math side. We've got some really great things going in, well, I said the map was the math, and this is a big picture view with all of those 4 content areas.
That's excellent.
Very good.
We do have vacancies that continue to come in, as you'll see when we get to the personnel report. We have some instructional aides, and with those vacancies, again, we've talked a bit about, do we hire somebody for a year with the potential to have a layoff the following year? And we need to think about a possible transition plan. We have some aide openings at the middle school. We've got one potentially at Lake Prairie that we're tinkering with. Instead of advertising a full-time aide position as we currently have, to advertising a position for a lunch recess supervisor. Why that route? So our instructional assistants, they're in the classrooms during class period, but we also have to have supervision of students during the day too, because teachers, believe it or not, have to go eat lunch. And
Oh, they do that?
Yeah. And so a lot of our support staff, our aides, are going to the cafeteria. They're also supervising recess. And so we are looking to post some lunch recess supervisor positions where they work 3 hours a day, come in, help with those supervisory roles. And you can see how it's more cost effective for us, and it may be a possible solution as we continue to have more vacancies down the road to not replace with full-time, because we know our financial resources with a failed referendum are drying up. And so that's what we'll be working on in the upcoming week. Post the position and see if we have a pool of candidates to even go down that route. If we do, it's something we might be able to build upon. If no one applying for that, then we might have to go to a different direction to figure out long-term solutions. Any comments?
This might not work for the elementary level, but once you get to the middle school and intermediate school, when I taught at Maryville, we had, the lunch duty was a added teacher position. So you would make a little extra stipend, and I did it the 2 years I was there, made an extra $1,000. But it was something just in-house that was just added on for teachers. I don't know if we would have the interest for it, but, and it might be tough, again, at the elementary level, because I know that's a prep time too sometimes for those elementary teachers. But maybe at the high school, middle school, it's an option.
The great thing is it can work out for the school district, and it works out compensation-wise for the teacher. The bad thing is it can definitely lead to burnout pretty quick.
Right, right.
So, check. What's next on the list? We have, we've had an architect update this morning, and so when we get to board reports, I think it would be great if Nate, Dr. Cleefish, if you or Katie could just kind of report out when we get to that, some exciting things in the works. And Lake Prairie is coming along. Dana, I think the latest report, we're looking to open school on time.
Knocking on wood as I say that, but yeah, yes, yeah.
We're looking crazy out
They
there.
are, they definitely are. Yeah, ceilings are, we're holding off on ceilings to go up just because it's obviously muggy. But they're going to be testing the system, I think, in the next 2 weeks, actually, so, yeah. We're getting there. Lights are all up, everything, LEDs in place, and ready to rock and roll.
It's important to note there's some rumors in the community that, hey, look, freshman football had a low turnout. The program must be dying. That is false. We knew that this cohort of kids coming in was small. It's important that our public know that there's a huge number the following year that's coming up. This is not necessarily abnormal amongst the schools in our division. So there may not be a strict freshman football team, but all of those participants will have an opportunity to either play at the JV level or the JV level kids combined with the freshmen, and we make out what they call C team and still remain competitive, and that is not abnormal in the circuit. So there's not a concern with our program dying. We do have another crop coming through. This was anticipated, so be mindful. Our program's not dying. And that's all I have. Any of the 3 cabinet members that I've overlooked anything? So that's the report.
All right, thank you. Board members report.
Go ahead.
I mean, do we want to give away all of the good details before the big picture gets given? Everything, the field development's coming along. We've put a lot of mindfulness into making sure that the community feels welcome and open, that the space is usable for all levels of our community, and inviting.
We're conscientious of the budget and keeping it at a minimum.
Yes.
We're not going crazy with everything.
Yes, the selecting of the bricks has been a good option. Keeping it look nice, but having a more cost-effective option with it. Same thing with the addition of the central office, keeping that scaled down, but still appropriate for what we need. I mean, it's coming along. We're getting right there to the end of the details.
Good. Anything else? All right. Thank you. Alrighty, moving on. Approve the minutes of the meeting held on Thursday, July 13th, 2023.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion passes. Personnel, approve the personnel report dated Thursday, July 27th, 2023.
I'll make a motion to approve the personnel report.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion passes. Number 2, approve the new position, digital learning assistant, replacing the district technician.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I just think that this is a good move on our behalf. It's focused to helping the customer and providing the services that really get to the bottom of technology for those that don't understand like myself.
Yeah, and I like the forward thinking on it, so.
Yeah.
And the
Good
job
initiative.
description was very thorough. You did a good job.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Alrighty, award the bid for the Lake Prairie Elementary School classroom addition.
So I'm going to defer this to Dana. We had recent bids, and then Dana also has a guest that she invited who can speak in more detail. So Dana, I don't know how you would
Gosh,
have.
this seems so long ago, but it was, I believe, last Tuesday, July 18th, that we opened bids here. We had quite a crowd. I have not seen a crowd like that.
Wasn't it like 20 some?
32, like
33.
33, okay.
You have to count the count.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's right, 33 bids for the 8 categories that we had. So that was really
Wow.
inspiring to see. And so we advertised this appropriately. We held our pre-bid meetings, and then we had our bid opening here at the middle school. And it went well. So Chris Lucheski is here from the Skillman Company to present the bid results and how everything went.
Sure.
Wherever you want to stand.
Wherever.
You'll be on video if you come over here. So that would be.
You can be on video wherever we go. Which is your best side?
Yeah, none. I have some copies if you folks need some. I don't know if it's going to be presented up there.
Dr. Cleef, I can present it or I can pass a copy. We know Dr. Cleefish will want a copy.
I've got
There's a handful.
Oh.
He's on the technology.
My bad. I
That's all right.
forgot it's on the, you have the digital version.
Oh, well.
That's all right. Paper's good too. Thank you for thinking of me.
So Superintendent Andy, Dana, thank you so much. That was great. That's a tough one to follow. So yeah, on July 18th, we opened bids and great turnout. I mean, this is what you want. This was a picture perfect turnout. 3 or 4 bidders per category. It doesn't get any better than that. So, so I just would like to know if board policy wants me to read all 8 bid categories and dollar amount, or just lump 1 through 8 together with a total dollar amount, just to get into the minutes.
Yeah, let's go through each one
Okay.
to avoid.
All right. So what we are seeking today is approval to award contracts to the 8 prime contractors. And we also have a zero cost change alternate that we would like to accept. And this will match the carrier unit that's part of the existing Lake Prairie construction going on right now. So that way your maintenance has one brand to work on per se in the future. So those 8 bid categories we saw to do the breakdown this way. Bid category 1, general trades, Gibson Lewis. Contract $1,616,000. Bid category number 2, masonry, Iwanski Masonry, $838,000. Bid category number 3, roofing / metal composites, Corellis Roofing, $252,517. Number 4, metal studs, drywall and acoustics, Kleckner Interiors, base contract $465,330. Number 5, aluminum entrances and glazing, Trout Glass and Mirror, $110,000. Number 6 is plumbing, it's Keo Mechanical, $128,687. Number 7 is HVAC, sheet metal, circular mechanical, $619,000. And finally, number 8, bid category number 8, which is electrical and technology, that's Sweeney Electric Company. Dollar amount is $371,810 for a total of $4,401,344. So we have a great lineup here. It's contractors we've worked with for over 30 plus years. We had pre-award conferences at our office, scoped them out, scopes there, which is the work, so we're comfortable to recommend these contracts.
I'm familiar with every vendor there, and they're all very reputable. Like you said, I've worked with them for many years. The only one I'm not familiar with is Iwanski Masonry. Where are they out of?
They are out of Oak Brook, Illinois.
Okay.
And I'll say this, Dr. Cleafish, I had them as a prime for the New Hammond High School,
Okay.
and outstanding.
I saw some.
This is in a environment where mechanical units, electrical gear is tough to get, manpower is very tough to get anymore.
Mhm.
So we would request 2 or 3 additional masons
Mhm.
to help us keep the schedule. 15 would show up. So being that this Lake Prairie edition is heavy masonry driven and structural steel, this is the team you really want.
Good.
Yeah. We're comfortable with that.
Well, we got lucky that they were the ones that had the lower bids too.
And-
There's some big spans in these.
There's some, like in the electrical, there's some gaps there, and that's vendors like to play ball with certain contractors, so numbers are a little different. Some contractors see it a little differently and think they have to add, but we're comfortable with the low base bid.
That's good for me.
And these bids came back within our budget?
Yes, it did. Our budget, for this was, $4,857,000, so
Gives us a little bit.
yes, it does.
We were pleased. We were trending a little lower in-house, Scott and I like that.
Yeah.
And I won. But, so we adjusted some soft costs to make it work within the school's budget. Again, we're comfortable with that.
Good.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Thanks for being here tonight.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anytime, you're welcome. Anything else,
Appreciate it.
any other questions?
Mhm.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
You too.
You do.
All right, do I have a motion?
I'll go ahead and make a motion to award the bids for Lake Prairie Elementary project.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second, any further discussion? All in favor by saying aye,
Aye.
all opposed say nay, motion passes.
I wonder what contractor they were.
Mm.
It's good to see they showed up.
Hopefully they were on this list. Alrighty. Number 2, approve the solicitation of bids for snow removal. Did we get 33?
No, usually not. Well, this is just so that we can go out and request some, proposals back here and ask for the RFPs. It's for the same, standard service that we've asked for the last, I think it's 3 years now we're going on, where high school and middle school are included in the base scope of the, bid, and that we are taking alternates for the elementaries. By doing so, our crews then really pay attention to, they get those elementaries going, they're able to first start at the transportation center and focus on that, move over to the elementaries, and then jump into the sidewalk clearing of the other schools at the high school and middle school. So it's been working out well. Last year, and I forgot to look at this, I think last year we only had the one bid come back, and unfortunately, I think that's been the situation for
Yeah.
the last couple of years, but we've been very happy with that, with our local provider here, but we're open for other bids, always looking for
Possibly
competitive.
33.
Mhm.
I don't even know if there's 33 snow companies in the area anymore.
It's been challenging, because of just workforce and that.
We just don't get the snow
landscape, the
either, so a lot of people aren't
gas
doing
prices,
it.
the Equipment.
And the liability on
It
the
has-
contractor as well, I know that
Yeah,
from my
it,
brother-in-law.
it's
It's,
really been.
it's an expensive insurance to have.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yep, and he was hit on it when he was doing it, and he said never again, so,
Yeah.
Yeah, CJ?
yeah.
So, with your approval, we'd like to go forward with that and bring your recommendation.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Number 3, approve the agreement between Tri-Creek School Corporation and South Lake Lowell Pop Warner Football and the cheerleading for the use of the old middle school football field for the sum of $1 for a term of 1 year beginning August 1st, 2023 through July 31st, 2024.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yes.
I was just gonna say, I read all the contract and all that, it is extremely thorough, and I appreciate all the safeguards we have in place for liability, for their responsibility of maintaining the grounds, and it's very thorough.
I'm impressed with how the school corporation has supported the community in an opportunity for kids. With the failed referendum, it being a $1 lease, we have a lot of mowing in our school district. And I reached out to the Pop Warner president this week to say, hey, look, we're really looking at your organization to provide the cutting and the trimming of the grass from the fence inside, because right now they only mow the actual football field, and then we maintain everything else. So there's the upper level of the old middle school with chain link fence area, and then they've got the concession stand, and then there's the lower green area between what used to be the parking lot. The president was extremely receptive to taking on that task, called me back and said, look, we don't know if our mower can handle that.
Yeah.
Would you be receptive to us just paying you a fee for your people to just do it? I haven't even had a moment to talk to my team since that conversation. Part of it's not about the money, it's about the manpower that it takes being on the job, and sometimes we're shorthanded, and so we just need to process through that. So my recommendation is to table this tonight until we work through that change in the agreement.
The difficult part about it during that time of year is that we have our athletic fields for our students to maintain, so the focus of our grounds crew is definitely on maintaining those fields for competition. And where the rain falls or when things happen, we're pulling crews to make sure that our fields are perfect for our own, students, but then on the same hand, we have, fields to maintain for Pop Warner as well. So it becomes tricky to get everything cut all at the same time.
Well, I think it's a legitimate request to have them maintained inside the fence.
And then they do, it's adding the additional 2 down the hill, which is what they all practice in. I just wanna make sure that tabling doesn't affect their ability to practice, because practices start next week. Or give the impression that this isn't something we're gonna work through and get sorted out.
No, we're gonna have a partnership, we just wanna fine tune the details and have it clear in writing.
And I thought what I saw was very thorough.
Yeah, it's not about the money, it's about the having personnel to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
In years past, we've received quotes from local landscapers to maybe supplement sometimes, so maybe that's an option.
That's
For
what I was
them to
thinking.
pick up the tab.
We could, maybe we could get an estimate and see what that would cost.
We've had that in
or
our back
Dean, I
pocket
don't
just
know.
I'll talk to John too, I might be able to loan him
Loan them a tractor.
yeah.
Cause that's the
I got
other
a
thing,
few
usually they
mowers.
have the dads out there that come and
Right.
do it on their spare
I
time.
think they have the manpower, it's just.
They have the they have the manpower, so I'll talk to them. I have a 72 and 0 term that I'm not even, that kind of sits there, so.
I would talk to you about that if I'd have known.
I think the other win for Pop Warner is they can mow it exactly to the height they want,
Yeah.
at the frequency they want, and then I'm not getting calls from members of their organization.
Yeah, it does get tough when when we're not at the school and we get over there and the boys are playing and the grass is seeded and it's like smacking their ankles.
I can promise
Those
you,
little guys, it's up to their
91
thighs.
football field will be mowed nicely.
What football field?
91.
Oh. Well, then
Yeah.
yes, we should table it.
So we'll take a look.
We don't have to motion for that.
Do we have one?
Do we have to make a motion to table it?
No, so you motioned it, you seconded,
Okay.
we had discussion, and so.
So we're just gonna table
dies.
it. Okay, perfect.
And then we'll bring it back.
Alrighty. Where was it at? No, this is 3. Alrighty. Alright, number 1, discussion of the Lowell High School and Lowell Middle School student athletic handbooks.
Yes, I'm gonna pass on a hard
I'll make that
copy.
motion. Make the motion.
I'll second.
Alright, any further discussion?
Yeah, so this is actually a discussion item. Yeah, sorry.
Oh,
Anybody else who needs one? This one?
yeah.
You-
I have.
There were some issues that came up this past school year, and we had some discussions. However, time passed. The administration felt like they were able to respond to some of those concerns, but I know that there's still some outstanding concerns. So no action is requested on this tonight, it's pure discussion. The purpose of our discussion is to give our administrator, so Patty came back today out of vacation to be here to hear your concerns. And because Kim Kilmer is out of town, Principal Terry is here to represent the middle school. So really, it's just it's informal conversation. We want clear direction on what you will support, what you won't support, and give some guides of what you're looking for.
Well, I'll start. The two are essentially one and the same. And I think that the middle school, we talked about in meetings past in January that the middle school, we need to give a little bit more flexibility to our young athletes to, one, get them interested and excited about being in our athletics programs. The group of 11 freshman football players coming in is a good example of that. So there's a understanding around the school and the kids and the town that anything is gonna cause a 365. And a 365 means it's gonna happen and there's no wiggle room in it. And that really isn't the truth of the matter. So I think that we need to change that perception. And I think that that first offense needs to allow the opportunity for a real sit-down conversation with the family and the student, the athlete, to let them know that that's your one warning of the rest of your career in athletics, and from there forward, then we start tacking on, the loss of opportunities. That would be one item that I'd like to see worked through. The next would be the wording of carrying on discipline from the middle school to the high school. I understand it's to keep that in there if a kid in a spring sport doesn't finish out their consequences. But I just believe that, again, we're dealing with young students, and having that opportunity to make a mistake and recover from a mistake and start out with a clean slate is really important to the mental health of the students and athletes. So I'd like to take a look at that and see that change somehow and how it's worded. And that goes along with one of the notes in here, which is tone. The tone of all of this is very rules-based. It's very regimented. It doesn't start out with what we're excited about for student athletes in town and what Lowell athletics is. It starts out and continues on with a lot. So I just think we can really update this, slim it down, and let the athletes and the parents know that we're here. You're gonna make a mistake. We're here with procedures and processes to guide you through that, and not necessarily punish you and stick you in a corner every turn you take. So that's just my brief on it.
And, just supporting what Katie mentioned, I look at progressive discipline. Kid makes a mistake, it's a verbal conversation, unless it's really serious. But a verbal conversation, you made a mistake, don't let it happen again. Maybe document it. And then move up to the next notch if that occurs again. And get the parents involved, making sure that the parents are informed of what's going on and asking for their support in rectifying the problem along with the kid. But the responsibility is for the kid. And then again, the third time, depending on the severity of it, that's when it comes to, taking away from their sport or whatever it is, the punishment. But I agree that it needs to be done with some respect, not to demean the person, because again, that's the message we're trying to send to them, to become productive adults in their life. Not to demean and put them down, but let them know this is the result of your negative behavior. And then they can step up above that if it continues.
Which I remember too, I feel like it's a little subjective in the wording, and it's probably meant to be that way so that we can have some flexibility, but it's almost too subjective. It leaves a lot of room for interpretation that can be unfair.
So, for clarity, at the high school, the clean slate, on page 15, at the top, that kind of final paragraph, in the event that a middle school suspension is not fulfilled at Lowell Middle School, a meeting will be initiated with the high school principal and athletic director to discuss the fulfillment of the penalty. I would think that would be okay,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That, hey, we understand growing up, you're now in high school, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
If the principal determines that the ECA council should be a part of the decision process, an ECA hearing will be scheduled.
Yeah, I don't think we need that.
So I didn't have Patty or Terry prepare anything for tonight, or intend for them to speak. But Patty, you're here. If you want to comment on why that sentence is in there and you feel comfortable to do so, I think it would be good to have that conversation. If you don't, that's okay too.
Well, no, that line is in there for normally an administrative review, in all likelihood would be Angela and I.
Right.
Our kids that are coming in with these repeated behavioral bad decision type things, those are sit down with me, have a conversation, you're starting fresh, here's what it needs to look like, here are the support systems in place to support that. We are one of them. Let's talk about, you've heard me go through this before. Those are the conversations we have with middle school behavioral type issues, kids that are carrying a penalty into high school. We can and have gotten into situations where it could be Angela and I on a review. We can have a situation of a very aggressive offense that happens very late, almost into the freshman year, which would fall under our policy, but it happens late enough in the 8th grade year. This goes beyond that conversation if they could potentially pose a threat to the other athletes that they are going up against, or other kids in the locker room. And it may not be physical in nature, it could be something else. There could be a situation where Angela and I vehemently disagree, and we could pull in Andy and make an administrative decision. 99.9% of the time, that's exactly what we would do. If there are other things beyond that at different levels, the only reason that was ever put in there is it leaves that hole in some strange situation where more input and feedback would help us to make a better decision. It's the only reason that line is in there, it's never been used. That's why. And we have had, I want you to understand, most of those things that we come are clean slate are the exact things you're referencing. But I also want to make very clear, we have some things that are not simple, little, they require counseling. They require sessions in school, they require outside counseling. They require an integration back into sports. And so to just say, I know that was a young mistake. As I told Andy, we have to protect all kids. And to lump it into bad middle school decisions, that's why that administrative review is in there.
I think there's plenty of room in the language to incorporate progressive, conditions to get back into sports.
Yeah, there's
And
5
if-
steps actually to get back in.
And if they are following and adhering and following what's recommended, that's good effort on their behalf. So that's a good indicator. But if during that meeting, they're sitting there like this, laughing and smiling at you when you're being serious, that's a good indicator as well. So I think it's important to have that face-to-face interaction with them, but, not to be so hard-nosed that, you screwed up in middle school and now you're not going to participate. We don't want to be so hard-nosed. We want to give them the opportunity, but they have to be a participating partner in the process.
In many situations, Nate, we've had kids that have those middle school penalties that are running out of time, that do something really bad at the end, do community service. Instead of, and we do all, there's no white box answer for everything, but we've employed that as well. We've had some buses washed, we've had some things done that, so.
I hear what you're saying, and I can see the need for that in certain situations. My issue is perception's reality. And the perception is, that's it, I'm done, can't do high school sports, I'm not even gonna try. And we're dealing with kind of a age group, I think, of kids, and I see it even in my own son, where they're afraid to make a mistake. And then if they do make a mistake, that recovery opportunity, I just don't see the same resilience all the time. And so there's something about the wording of this, or the word that gets out when students do have to have a 365 hearing or do make mistakes, that is giving the perception of an iron fist ruling. And when you read this, it sounds like that. So I feel like we need to find a way to not have that perception.
Well, I will tell you, our handbook was written with our attorney. And the language that's in there was very specific for that reason, and it goes back away the original verbiage and language, but it was to avoid loopholes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say in general, attorney language is a little harder than a lot of language, but that's who wrote it and that's why it was written that way. So, it's intended to be a very clear model of what happens at this stage, this stage, this stage, this stage. I can tell you our approach, Andy has sat in on our hearings, our approach is not that at all.
And I can understand that. Here's a perfect example. Number 1, misconduct. Behavior considered unbecoming of an athlete. What does that mean? It could mean anything to anybody, and I could have a very different opinion on what unbecoming behavior is. It just creates this massive umbrella of things that you do anything wrong. You get a lunch detention, well, that's unbecoming behavior, now I'm gonna get 365. And that is an impression that is out there. I don't know if we need to have maybe some kind of
What page is that?
grander look at it,
On
14. Like a long-term study of this and long-term look at totally revamping. But even looking, and I know it's similar to other school districts. I've looked at some of the surrounding school districts and they all say similar things to a certain degree. But I think we can be better. I think we can lead and be better and be better for our students and our athletes.
At the end of the day,
I'm sorry.
oh, go ahead.
And we were advised not to list specifics, because when you list specifics, you are going to eventually have that one that is not listed and does not fall under the jurisdiction of your handbook. So that's why it's written, unbecoming, a suspendable offense, but it also can be an offense, somebody does arson in the community, or defaces a public building outside of school time, or things that happen at another school, or social media. And so we were told by listing specifics that we actually reduced the validity of the handbook. I hear what you're saying about.
And I hear what you're saying too about the defacing property or arson in the community. And those things are being handled and are handled on the community level. And yes, we want our athletes to represent themselves differently. And that's expected. So we're not gonna be able to specifically list if you go, light the public park on fire. We can't cover all of that. But that's just one small example in a large, like you said, attorney-written document that feels very risky for a student athlete to even make a wrong move. And we already have mental health issues with kids these days and anxiety issues and all of those things, and we're trying to funnel them into sports and funnel them into clubs, but then we're taking this and this and this and we're slapping them with it, and then they make another mistake and they're getting slapped with more from the town and they're getting it from their parents. And where do we give them that opportunity to recover and have a soft landing and a soft outlet? It was always athletics. It was always go out and play a sport, go work out, go run. That'll help you, get through it. But now we're giving this huge umbrella that leaves a lot of room for error that's going to be called out on these kids. So I just would like to see us as a district take a hard look and start changing that momentum. It doesn't have to be what everybody else is doing. We can be a leader in it, and it might not happen this year, but I think we need to move in that direction. That's not what I would like to see.
I agree.
So we have the regular student parent handbook, and behavior is pretty well articulated in that. And at the end of the day, it would be summed up of refrain from an illegal activity, be respectful, and follow the rules. Is that basically sum up the same standard for an athlete?
Ours is actually based on the high school handbook. The same criteria and wording, it's the same as the handbook for the high school.
So maybe the wording is, the behavior expectations are the same as during the school day, but please know, by being an athlete, you are a representative of the school and the community, which is why this is so much extra important. Yada, yada, yada. Well, is that what we're looking for as to explain why this is such a privilege? Athletics is a privilege, and you represent the school. And by that, there is a higher standard of adherence to expectations.
Right, and that's always been the case and always been known. But yes, slimming down those top three for sure is a start. Then we get into the more specifics of the violations and how that is all handled and what we consider, slapping them with multiple. Even, I've got plenty of notes on the actual student handbook. You make a mistake in school, you get in trouble in school. If you're an athlete now, you're getting also in trouble from athletics. If you make a mistake out of school, you're potentially getting in trouble with the town or the police. Then you're getting in trouble in school, and then you're also getting in trouble with athletics. That's a lot.
You get in trouble with town, you don't get in trouble with school, I don't think, can you? Maybe.
Sure. But there is something in the handbook for high school stuff with stop-arm violations and drivers and things like that, that would be an in-town issue with the police. That
So,
then becomes a
yeah, so we can use the
punishable
park
offense.
fire as the example.
Mhm.
Violation of the athletic code that results in an arrest, and then they go on to list such as possession of alcohol, consumption, drugs, theft, and vandalism. So really it would have to result in an arrest to then trigger what you're saying is then that's double punishment.
To the person that could maybe be, and if this, I understand it, right, that this also applies to our extracurricular clubs, right? So let's say we're not even talking about an athlete, we're talking about somebody that's interested in music. And we know that people are, for the most part, not internally making these bad choices because they're a bad person, we know that. They're making these choices and doing these things for some reason. And what might help them would be being in the band or being on the basketball team or being involved and taking that away because you now made a massive mistake and lit the park on fire and have legal troubles. Now you don't even have an opportunity to play any high school sports. Is that really the right choice? Is that really what we're trying to do to help students? Can we provide other things and maybe get them in the right direction?
Mm-hmm. So when I hear you talk about that, I would say, okay, if I were the club sponsor, so let's just use choir for the example, right? Let's say it's not a co-curricular, right? It's a pure extracurricular.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say that a student got in trouble in the community or whatever, but when they come to my sponsored event, they're respectful, they're contributing, they elevate the group, and I have absolutely zero problem. So that would be a situation that I think that you're referencing, like, here's something positive, they're making a contribution, why would we take them out of that?
Right.
So then I change the hats and say, oh my gosh, I'm the club sponsor. They got in trouble outside in the community, and you know what? Their attitude when they come to my event is not good. They're not elevating it. I think then at that moment, as a club sponsor, I'd be like, just based on your behavior in front of me, I don't care about this. Like, this is a privilege, and you're not meeting the expectation of the club. And so I just voluntarily say, you know, we're going to put these interventions in place. I'll give you the due process, progressive discipline. But then I don't need a council to make that decision.
And isn't that what a coach already has? Like if we're talking about all of these, don't you already have that discretion to have somebody on your club? And if they are being disruptive or causing problems within your internal unit, you've already got that ability to say, sorry, this isn't.
And that's
working.
self-contained.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we're talking about here is these external factors impacting now
Mm-hmm.
the club when they're not related.
Mm-hmm.
That's when the athletic department will go back to, but it's a higher standard and double jeopardy, so to speak.
Yeah, and our threshold is an out-of-school suspension. So we're going by what our board has determined, these are things you can't do as a student. And so that's our threshold, which is pretty high. I mean, to get suspended out of school, and so that's what initiates the first hearing, which usually is a very small, but it's a corrective measure, and it puts in place refusal skills, options, resources, and all of those things just by going through that process. So when we send kids to, if they're vandalizing in the community, and they get caught, and they get in trouble, and we're sending them to other schools, and they're vandalizing at other schools. I mean, the corrective behavior is you can't do this, you can't do it in our park, you can't do it when you wear a Lowell uniform. And so it reciprocates. And it's a learning situation as much as and I hear what you're saying for behavior, and I will also throw out there are schools that don't have a handbook. They say, coaches, you decide. Our coaches want no piece of that. Because you will have a different coach have very high standards, you'll have another coach have no standards, you'll have another coach that will look the other way, and I reference coaches, but it would be ECAs as well, and it creates this in your program, and animosity and hatefulness, and we are the ones that started the athletic handbook like 30 years ago, in mind to provide some consistency, some educational benefit, not, I know you're seeing it as punitive. There's really some worth to the accountability piece of the handbook. It really is.
I believe in that. I do. But there also is what is almost becoming like a blacklisting or a discouragement from kids who might not have that same home support, or parents who are not from here and don't really know, what this policy means, and just think, oh, well, they got in trouble, now they can't do sports anymore. That's what I heard, because it is what's being heard. That is the general understanding from people who haven't lived here their whole lives and know how Lowell sports work. It's, oh, well, they got 365, so I guess we're gonna have to move. That's not what this is saying, and that's not what you guys are doing, but that's the impression. And the more people we have moving into Lowell from outside of Lowell and outside of Indiana, this is what they're seeing, and it's very subjective, it's very broad, and they're not always hearing about how it's applied at the end, because that's the part that parents don't want to talk about when their kids do get in trouble, and so nobody asks, and everybody just assumes, oh, I mean, there's rumor mills flying from here to Portage about certain students that have done things and gotten in trouble that may or may not be able to participate in sports. And the reality is that student got, 10%, 20%, what we typically do, but that's not what anybody thinks. And so truly, I'm telling you, the perception is not what is happening. What is happening is being done with care, but what is being perceived and put out it's not in line
It's the
anymore.
365 term, right? So even during the school day with progressive discipline, we never talk about you're expelled until you get a hearing, and now we're going to assign a detention. And then the next time you do it again, it'll be in school, then an out of school, and then expulsion. Like, that's not the approach, and maybe that's the way this is coming across. Oh, you messed up, you're getting expelled from athletics for an entire year. You go to the hearing, and now
And some parents don't know that there is a hearing opportunity, and some communication isn't being given at all levels that a hearing is then scheduled. So if you don't know any better and you haven't had the time to, even find this in final forms, and if you're a working parent or you're a single parent, you might just get that call and say, oh, they called and said my kid's 365, so, I don't know what happens next, but I guess they're out of sports. That's truly what is being perceived and is happening. So we have to figure out a way to not be doing that anymore. But to your point about the coach's discretion and what we were just talking about with the choir example, yes, we don't want to burden our coaches with more, but I bet there's some coaches out there that really want to get that kid on their team and help to turn them around and see some potential in some of those kids and want to take them under their wing and see what can happen. There may not be that case with all, but there may be with some, and we're not even providing that opportunity for those kids. So,
But we're not taking that up, they have to do a third offense before they miss a day of practice. So we don't pull them away from the coach. They go right back in, and their first and second offense, they go right back under the wing of that coach. They're not suspended away from it. They gotta get to a third suspendable violation. Not with you, but with us, a third suspendable violation before they're pulled out of practice. It's in a high school where kids should be developing.
Right.
Some schools are making good decisions. 3 in a 4-year period is.
and there, I do have some examples that I'm not going to share publicly, but there are some examples where I think we're failing some kids who are going through some tough times, who are getting caught one year doing one thing in an aggressive sport, then the next thing something happens in an aggressive sport, and what they have going on in their life is maybe not being properly supported and looked at either. So I'm not coming out of nowhere with some of these impressions. There are lots of examples, lots of things I've experienced and seen. So I feel like it needs some looking into. And it might not happen in a year, but I think it's something we have to put some effort into and some care into. And if we were the first one 30 years ago to come up with an athletic handbook, then we should be the first one to come up with something that works better for our students.
I think as I listen, I would sum it up as there's a perception of you're getting the hammer, but in reality, you are getting support. You are getting some wraparound service. And that's probably part of the disconnect, that the impression versus reality, because it is progressive, it is supportive in nature. And it goes back to the tone and the approach. And maybe that's something, well, it's something we need to take a look at.
You said that, so at the high school, basically, until you're losing any practice, you're on to your third offense.
We have, at the high school, that your first offense, the administrator, if you're suspended, the administrator immediately tells you, as soon as you return from your suspension, you meet with me, we get a record of that, we also contact the parents right away in that situation. They come in, our hearings are every 2 weeks, we schedule 2 a month, so I put them into practice once they schedule that hearing. Unless what they have done poses a danger to other students,
Right,
and then I don't.
right.
And that's the only situation that I can think of where, or there's a weapon involved, or
Right,
there are certain things where we gotta sift through that and trust the process, but they still go back into,
And that's
when
the
it's
first
safe,
offense.
that's the first offense. Second offense, they might get more of a contest penalty, but they go right back into practice. So we keep them with that coach.
But middle school's not aligned with that?
No, they wait until they have the hearing,
Why?
because the student's misbehavior is sometimes dangerous and,
But not all the time.
no, definitely not.
But all the students would get that same treatment. So that's another issue, is the middle school and high school not being aligned where they should be.
They do their hearings as soon as that kid comes back. But they try to schedule with parents, but if the parents,
So if they're out, we try and schedule it as soon as possible, whereas they're on a schedule every 2 weeks. So they don't want the student out for 2 weeks, ours are, we schedule it as soon as they come back.
But-
The parent has to know in some cases to ask for it.
We call them as soon as
And, yeah,
yeah.
So that seems to be another talking point. At the high school, the student has to request it. And at the middle school, we do inform, but sometimes it could be delayed.
Yeah, there's no delays.
Is there a reason for that? Like, why wouldn't it just be automatic to say, hey, look, this is the case, you got suspended from school, you're involved in an ECA, and this means that we need to schedule a hearing?
Yeah, that's what we do within that day typically.
no, that's not what's happening.
That we would let them know. like,
Not
right
within
away.
that day, and that's not the way that I've heard from a few people the conversations are going. So while that might be the procedure that's in place, that's not what is playing out.
And at the high school, the kid has 5 days to basically request a hearing through the athletic director?
they come in as soon as they return, because our administrators, when there's a suspension, tell them right away, that we make contact as well. If they don't come in those 5 days, we send a letter. And we still try to reach the parent, but if we don't, we still send that letter.
And I do like that idea of having a high schooler have that responsibility. Certainly middle schoolers don't have the wherewithal for that yet. And some of them may have never even gotten in trouble before, so, walking them through that process is a little bit different.
Right, well, I guess my issue would be with you can't go back to your athlete, so say you serve your suspension or whatever. But say and you can't have you don't have a hearing until after the suspension is, right? So if that student is suspended, all the way up to, say they got suspended and they're out for Friday, they can have their hearing, but what if there happened to be a tournament or something on that weekend? Their suspension's done, but they can't have their hearing. So in the high school's policy, they could have already scheduled that, but in the middle schools, they wouldn't be able to go to it. So I guess that's my issue.
I mean, I guess I look at like the offenses are pretty significant, so to get an out-of-school suspension,
Right.
they're typically very significant. I'm thinking like a kid that, is fighting and hurting other people, and then, or, sexual harassment, or bullying, they're being unkind to other kids, and then we haven't even talked to them about it yet, and that we're letting them go to practice. I've had some parents express some concerns to me, the child, went back to, they, even when it's like just a detention, and we haven't had a meeting with the parent or whatever, but the kid gets to go back to practice the next day to be around the same kids that they maybe, did something, a violation to them. That's,
How would the high school handle that they'd be potentially in the same situation? How is that handled at the high school?
In a situation where they're going back and that athlete is there, so Kyle's helping out.
they're not.
Yeah,
Like
so-
if they get in a fight and the athlete's
Yeah.
on the team and they're both now practicing together.
Because you can, once they schedule, they can go back. At the middle school is obviously different, but, so I guess in that situation where you had, say, a student athlete was fighting, and then, at the middle school, they don't want to send them back to athletes until they've met with them, but at the high school, if they were caught fighting, but they've scheduled their hearing, I guess that's, to me, that's what the coaches are there for. Or,
Yeah.
at that.
I mean, we definitely have to create it's just like with all progressive discipline, you have to
Right.
make that conflict no longer exist. We always talk to the other party that's on the team and say, when this athlete comes back, where are you at in that relationship now? Do we need to be with a different partner? Do we need to drill separately? Do we need to bring both of you in or whatever? And we make the coach aware, but they're gonna have to coexist at some point in time in most situations. There's a fight that occurs in a hallway over various reasons, usually a boyfriend or a girlfriend.
Right.
Those fights look a little bit different than a fight that happens in a wrestling room or on a basketball court. And a lot of it has to do, I know Terry's had some situations where she's had some very aggressive fights. And we've had some serious conflicts like that too, but all we've been able to do, we get an assessment also to see if it's an anger-related issue, a consistent issue, a deep behavioral issue, or if it was a one-time.
Right.
So those are the steps that we put in place. We rarely, I can count in a lot of years, 2 fights. Just 2 times.
I guess my whole issue there is, at the middle school, you're blanketing the whole thing. Where, I'm sure we could come up with some kind of thing that if it was some kind of offense that's gonna be an issue with that student athlete coming back until the hearing, then that would be one thing. But to me, to blanket the whole thing and say, no, not until you have your hearing, for, there could be, kids can get suspended, there's certain dumb things that they could do.
Yeah, it's not all egregious.
Right, I just don't wanna see a blanket over one thing, because then that's what's being held to that student athlete, at the middle school I'm talking.
Yeah.
So you're saying they don't have the hearing, you would want them to go back to practice and just keep playing in contests without any form of...
No. They still have their hearing. They could have it scheduled or whatever. I guess my issue comes up if that student serves their suspension, but their hearing for whatever reason can't be for a few days down because people aren't available, because that's happened. And
So
then
I see
they end up
that
missing
being-
out on something.
I would be concerned with with them just not wanting to schedule a hearing. Sometimes we have a hard time scheduling them.
Right.
Well, and
Yeah.
if we do move to this first offense at the middle school being
Yeah.
a meeting instead of a for sure loss of time,
Right.
that also would hopefully alleviate that because they've already started the process. If it's truly a kid that's gonna be a problem maker all the way through, then they have that opportunity to sit down, have that first meeting, and they know the next time that there will be a consequence and they know what to expect.
Right.
And so we can start to mold that behavior that is right now being misinterpreted. So, maybe that is a first opportunity to start changing these perceptions, is again at the middle school level with these punishments and,
Right.
and
That's
meetings
what I
and
would
everything
refer to,
else.
the progressive part,
Right.
conversation and step it up each time
Yep.
after that.
Yep,
For
exactly.
sure.
But
My
then there are gonna be situations, like she said, if they brought a gun to school and they're
Oh, yeah,
threatening to kill
absolutely.
Johnny,
That's
you're
different.
not gonna put them in that
Correct.
position.
That's different. That's egregious. That's not a kid messing around at lunch, doing things they shouldn't be doing with their sugar, you know? Let me read what Deb said. Since she couldn't be here, she had sent an email. So in regards to this, she said, the high school athletic handbook. I didn't notice that what changes were made for this year. I know we have spoke extensively with Patty on many of the concerns we have with athletics at the high school. I want to make sure we aren't double punishing student athletes as well as over punishing them. These kids have so much they need to worry about today versus times past with social media and cell phones. I would hope we as a corporation are making it a point to teach best behavior practices because kiddos are going to make mistakes and the outcome should be making sure they are learning from their mistakes and we aren't punishing or taking away some of their only truly enjoyable moments of their high school and middle school experiences. So she isn't able to be here today, but had taken the time to send an email, so I wanted to make sure we made that
So
point.
the changes that were discussed early last year
January.
were all implemented in the last year's handbook.
So,
We put that-
2 years ago.
Yeah, we
That
had a
was-
This
discussion.
came before the board.
Yeah, and we put all of those changes in there, that extra tier, that last tier was put in there, all of those progressions were changed, so,
I
For
think
the-
she's referencing the January meeting that we had at the end of January.
yeah,
this
everything
year,
was
Which,
added before this handbook, so this handbook is just really, just the same version of everything that was asked of us, the handbook before.
So the January meeting was more along the lines of the inconsistency between the high school and the middle school. Because in-school suspension was triggering the hearing here, but not at the high school. But Patty is right in that 2 years ago, there were some concerns. Patty came before the board,
Mhm.
talked through that. It was very helpful because, again, it was the perception and like, but in reality, it's no, there is a lot of support and good
For sure.
and the progressiveness. So January was that inconsistency, and it's, again, I think it's still the perception of Hammer. The part that I still need some clarity on, because I heard you say from reading the email about double punishment. That notion would basically say this doesn't exist because by that term, it's handled through the school and that's the end of the road. But that's not what the board is requesting, is it?
no, I think
No.
Okay.
that's,
Because, I mean, at the end of the day, student athletes should be held to a higher standard.
which ISHAA has, a lot of this comes from that and adds to that, right?
Well, the state doesn't get involved in local level discipline, but from a grade standpoint, from a citizenship standpoint, they certainly make those recommendations. Even with our drug and alcohol and vaping, we've put plans in place to help the kids overcome. I mean, but at the end of the day, there are certain things you sacrifice as a person to be an athlete or to be an ECA, or to be a student driver to some degree, right? You can't.
It's a privilege.
And this has been the extension of that, just a reinforcement of the conduct that we want them to, personify and carry themselves in a productive way. I think there are huge differences between middle school and high school. And really, Katie, what that's based on is we want them ready to walk out the door. We want them to know there are workplace things that you have to do to continue to be employed. There are things that you have to do as a student athlete to continue to play. You have to treat each other with respect. You don't get to vape all weekend. You don't get to have a party with your garage door up. You don't get to be out of control hurting others. You don't get to socially mediate. You don't get to sexually harass. And all of those things I've mentioned are the things that we address when there's a violation. We don't, a kid that gets a detention or a long-term detention, hey, coach, that kid's probably gonna do a little extra running for that coach.
Right.
Right, or not. So we do put baseline behavior in our coaches' hands. Some take it more serious than others. You talk about subjectivity. The same things you're hearing, I hear about other school corporations. They just look the other way. Their kids run rampant, do whatever they want, and are still in uniform on a Friday night or a Tuesday evening. And I think our kids are better than that, and I think they want to be held accountable. If the way that we're portraying that needs to be softened or set in a softer tone, we just wrote it the way the lawyers told us to write it.
And that's how it reads, for sure.
Yeah, but
It does.
that's how, and I would imagine that our school handbook probably has some lawyer tones in it as well.
Yeah,
And,
that's like
and
some of the list, so.
that was what we were advised to do.
Right,
Because you all know, when a parent is angry, when their child has a violation, they wanna, but we've done I don't wanna pat ourselves on the back, but we've done a really good job working with parents. Because most of the time, our parents want help also.
right,
They know their child is vaping, they know their kid's going out on a Friday night.
right.
And so I think as much as we attempt to support our kids, we really put ourselves in a position of supporting parents. Rarely does a parent walk out of my office and doesn't thank me. When we have a kid on the 4th or 5th offense, we need help for them also. So, I mean, tone can change. We wrote it the way it's written because that's how we were told to write it, to be very specific, very distinct. Don't name everything because there will be that one thing that you don't put in ink and it'll be the egregious act that wasn't written out. It's a progressive program and it doesn't even tip until you have an out-of-school suspension. And we based that on what you said in the handbook was acceptable and not acceptable for kids in school. So maybe this is subjective, but that was the baseline that we went for, that would not be acceptable for student athlete also.
Right. I just want to make sure that we are applying the same things to our students as we do as an adult when mistakes are made. And mistakes are made always in life. And it's okay to make those mistakes and it's okay to recover from those mistakes. And in some cases with athletics, we're taking away a student's ability to truly recover if the penalty is too punitive for the one mistake, that first time mistake, that first time offender. I'm not talking about the kids that keep doing it repeatedly, the same thing with no concern. But I'm certainly talking about, that one whoopsie. They should be able to have a whoopsie. Because they're gonna do it then when it's even more severe, when they're out of the house and when they're out of their, when they're at college and now, or as an adult, when you can't recover as well, and it could be more severe. Have the opportunity to make mistakes and learn from them now while you're a kid. So I just wanna make sure we're supporting our students and our athletes in extracurricular activities as well in the same way.
And I've looked at the numbers a couple weeks ago, and consistently, our first contest suspension is usually 10 to 20%. It's a very, and I'm only speaking for the high school, but.
It's not a big deal if it happens at the beginning of the season, but what if your mistake happens right before conference, right before sectionals? And now we have to balance that. We've got a senior that maybe made a mistake that, the first time in their high school career, they made a mistake, and they're coming up on what could be their sectional state championship run, and they could be getting college looks for that. And if we apply that first time offense 10% rule, well, guess what? Not only have they lost the opportunity to be a state champion, they might have lost the opportunity to get a Division I or Division II scholarship. And that penalty is entirely too punitive for what may have been a first time, maybe you were partying offense. That doesn't balance from missing the first two meets and not being able to go to the first two meets of the season. There's no balance there, and that fairness and recovery and the whole picture is got to be part of that. And this doesn't give us the ability to do that anymore.
I don't know that we've ever.
We may not have ever, but
had that because
We have in
And
the middle
Coach Gilmore
school.
will tell you, if one of our kids goes out and gets caught drinking and it's before a sectional, I'm not playing him, I don't care what you do with them. And so, I mean, I don't think we've ever.
Maybe they go punch somebody in the face in the hallway because they kissed their girlfriend. Whatever it might be, it's a mistake, right? And I do know it's happened at the middle school with conference, and granted, that's not career ending, but it is a deterrent, and it is something. So it takes us back to that first offense thing, and just needing to like really take a look at this and what we have, because you might be in a corner where you have to apply the same rule that you applied to Timmy. Now you have to apply it to Johnny, even though it's right now during the state tournament. And I don't want ourselves in that corner. I don't want to be doing that to our student athletes, and we shouldn't do that to people, you know, in general. I think we've beat this horse to death.
Yeah.
Does that give you some direction? Thank you both for being here. We will work on this, and we appreciate the feedback and clarity, so thank you.
Appreciate you guys being here.
Thank you. Number 2, approve the 2023-2024 student parent handbook.
I'll make a motion.
I'm sorry.
Any further discussion?
Yeah.
Here are some hard copies of these summarized changes. And it is a 2-page. Right, because I might need to pull it up on your computer. If you don't have a copy, I've got one here you can look at.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry,
Let's go with
I
that.
thought I printed 3. All right, so discussion. Let's go through this, if you don't mind, because I got the summary changes to you late for my taste, and so I think it would be important for us to thoroughly go through here.
Yep.
So the first one regarding attendance, are there any concerns?
So Deb's email brought this up, I'll just summarize it. Basically saying we have excused and unexcused absence, and that 9 is the threshold. And the idea that she's saying is, can't they all just fall under 1, you get 9 absences, because what is considered excused and what's not considered excused.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So that is
State.
prescribed by the state of what constitutes an excused absence versus unexcused.
Yeah.
Should we go on to the next one?
Make up for.
So this is going to come up later regarding homework policy. I'm going to defer to Kevin to speak a little bit about homework policy.
Sure. What does the note say on the Kyle's handing, so I know I'm speaking to what it says?
Basically, expected to make up all schoolwork missed in accordance with the Tri-Creek School Corporation homework policy.
Sure. So we have been working since 2020 with the grading practices and reporting committee. And kind of one of the offshoots of that has been some conversation around homework and inconsistencies. Going back prior to my time at central office, there was a committee that created a homework policy dating back to work in 2011-12, and it was board approved in 2013. It's a 4-page document. It establishes like some minutes that are recommended by grade level. They're really high. I mean, they're very high. You, a high school kid, 4 hours should be expected after school. In looking at that and sharing it and doing the research on like the impact of homework, both negative and positive, the research is very much aligned that you have a very nominal impact of putting homework in the hands of kids because you have so much inequity at home. Kids who have parents who are available and educated and able to sit next to you and help you with that are supports. But if you have a percentage of your population, which is much larger than we know, that go home and try to do it on their own with no supports, they're being penalized for that with very little impact on what that actually does for them to learn material. So what the aim of our homework committee is to really inform not only our teaching staff, but our community about where we stand on homework. In the handbook, just to kind of quickly summarize, the first sentence of the language was, homework is an integral part of the educational ... And that statement alone, based on research and best practice, it is disproven. So while I made attempts with them to cosmetically change it for this handbook, it needs more than cosmetics. It needs a true philosophical, ideological upgrade that is then instilled in our staff and followed through with some educating. So because of that, our recommendation is to actually strike the old language from the handbook. It's not going to change any expectation or practice this current year. It'll allow us to really do it right, start from scratch rather than just trying to make cosmetic changes that get us there, and provide an informed presentation to the board and also, upon approval, to our staff and our families as well.
So you're saying all the schoolwork that was missed, that's what they need to do?
That
Yeah.
specific strike through, yeah, but it's
Not
bigger,
in
it's more than
accordance to
that.
the homework policy, because
Yes.
reality is, very few follow the policy to begin with.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
Good to go on to the next one, excessive absenteeism. This is a problem. We recently met as a leadership team. Our attendance rate on the state website, on the GPS, Graduates Prepared to Succeed, Tri Creek, our attendance is an issue, and it's across the district. The court system has the inability to hear all of the cases due to staffing issues, so they've stopped reinforcing that. Child Protective Services are contacted in certain situations that really doesn't yield a result. We send attendance letters, communications, phone calls regarding chronic absenteeism, and that oftentimes doesn't yield a result either. So it really is a dilemma that all of our schools are struggling with. They're getting together soon and school gets up and running for their school improvement plans. Attendance is one of those improvement areas, and they're searching for strategies. Really the only addition here is the addition of in-school suspension as a possible deterrent. We don't want out-of-school suspension kids, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it defeats the purpose.
But I think it was the middle school in particular that wanted to use this as an option to see if it would yield any kind of result.
So I feel like COVID started to change the standards of parents. Like I always was like, you're going to school unless you have a fever or you're vomiting. And then when COVID hit, everybody, was like, oh God, you got a sniffle, you got a sneeze, we can't let the school know, we might be out for 10 days, that whole series of things. So you just stay home. Well, then I kind of got into them thinking of, well, you are somewhat sick. Why would I send you, one, to suffer through the day and not really probably achieve much, and two, to get the rest of the class sick? So for going from you're maybe only going to miss 1 or 2 days of school because really that's all you might be vomiting and having a fever, to well, a day here and a day here, then all of a sudden I find myself with my son at 9 days absent and getting those letters and thinking back and saying, well, let me look at the days that we missed. Yep, you were sick that day. Yep, you had an ear infection this day. And they all kind of made sense, especially after the COVID. So I understand why this is happening. I don't know how to fix it, because in my own situation, I could be a suck it up, you're fine parent. And even being that way, I still find myself with him missing a few too many days.
So these 9 days, that counts even if you have a doctor's note and stuff?
The state does not care.
It's everything.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah.
And we're really scratching our heads.
I mean, it's
What do we do about it?
not every case is clearly that situation of actually being sick.
But all of our numbers did change following COVID, and I do think that it is that, you're sick, stay home.
Yeah, I really thought it was going to rebound a little bit this past year because the masks were gone and, kind of the paranoia was gone, and
Where's our biggest issue at school-wise?
it's at all the schools.
Oh, all of them? Middle school and elementary schools, that's kind of on the parents at that point.
Yeah.
Right, you know,
So.
the high school could be, you know, the middle school, and elementary schools could be legit, so the high school, I mean,
Yeah.
speak people not that way.
So really the only change in the handbook language is the addition of in-school suspension.
Yeah.
That's the board's pleasure.
Go ahead,
Elementary standards-based report cards. I'll let Kevin speak to this a little bit because this has really been a lot of his work. And you got some historical perspective too.
Absolutely, and like the major presentation came to the former board when there was a recommendation to change the existing Skyward standards-based report card to a much more family-friendly, teacher-friendly, informative report card. We actually can get data from Skyward about how many of our families open the Skyward report card. And in some of the samples I looked at, it was in the 22 to 26% range. And that indicates a problem, not that we're not giving feedback, but the format in which it was being provided was not of value to the parents. So we looked to change that, and that was the real aim of that grading practices and reporting committee. So for years now, we've been working on strengthening our assessments, building consistency and alignment across grade levels, and unveiling a template that is family-friendly, student-friendly, and teacher-friendly. We piloted it with the fourth grade teachers at Lake Prairie last year, solicited feedback from them about what they liked, what they would recommend for improvements, and we're ready now this year to unveil it. So what the language in the handbook does is it just reflects the changes in the language specific to the scale. Makes it so that it's not happening in Skyward, but it'll be happening in what we call Mastery Connect. And we're really excited because we have nearly 100% of our families attend the parent-teacher conference at the elementary level. So that is, I can't recall if it's 2 or 3 weeks before the grading period ends this year in October. It's the perfect platform to have a sit-down conversation with the teacher and parents, say, here's the new report card, and here are 5 talking points I want to share with you, so you really understand what you're seeing, why you're seeing it, and what kind of feedback that you're getting. So it'll be one-on-one, it'll be personal, and everybody will get the exact same message in it. So we'll be doing that actually at our staff development training, is working with our teachers to equip them to have those conversations and making sure they know how they're entering that data. I think that our families of our elementary kids are going to see it, and you're going to notice that those rates of like 23% access are going to go up because all of a sudden I have insights to what my students actually doing day in and day out, rather than just 3-letter initial of pro, which doesn't really tell us a whole lot.
I think this is a great tool for the teachers, for the parents, for the kids. It's a great opportunity to take some of that pressure that we put on our elementary kids with report card grades and start to change that mindset. It's going to take time because everybody's looking for that gold star, but I think that this will be a great opportunity to just, you're here to learn and we're here to help you. What's going to happen with the 5-6? Are they going to have?
So that's one of the pebbles that we're addressing right now, is the grading practices. I can tell you that there's definitely a leniency towards moving to the letter grade system as a part of the transition, but it hasn't been formally recommended yet. That'll be a part of like the overall intermediate school presentation that we give when we talk through it. But that's definitely the sentiment right now.
Okay, and then we talked about this before, Pop Warner. Jessica Plant.
Yep, we talked in the summer, we talked in June.
Okay, and so do we have what we need to make sure that that's gonna reflect what she?
I haven't heard from her again since the conversation, so I
Okay.
think the answer is yes. But
Okay.
if there's ever anything lingering, I told her I'd even be happy to talk to the folks at Pop Warner that require this
Mhm.
for the
The
academic
awards,
status,
the
et cetera.
academic,
Yeah.
academic
So
awards.
whatever we have to do to make that understanding, I told her I'm happy to help.
Okay. I think it was something as along the lines of, as long as we didn't have the scale with all of these options on the report card, she could apply whatever numbers to
Right.
it she needed to.
I told her it's very artificial to try to do it. It defeats the purpose of a standards-based report card, but I don't want our kids to be penalized because we're giving them better feedback than an A through F.
Exactly.
Do they get an effort scoring?
We call it learner outcomes
Yeah.
or work habits, and they do get that, yeah.
Maybe that would be more appropriate for Pop Warner.
This isn't local Pop Warner, it's a GPA that Pop Warner
The
requires.
national, with
The
the
national, and
control
they-
over.
And most
Yeah.
of the surrounding areas, the kids all get, it's like the high school awards banquet and awarding kids for good academics. And so they put it on their Letterman's jackets. It's a big to-do. They get put on a national level of, even if they meet certain levels, then they get recognized at the national level. And we're the only school of all the surrounding schools that we only usually send, like our 3 kids that are in the, advanced classes, because they typically get the, whatever the advanced, scores because of the way our scoring standards work, even though most of the kids deserve to have it just like everybody else. So I just wanna make sure we're mindful of that, because that's about 300 elementary school kids that are not getting the recognition that they
Yeah,
deserve.
we don't want that. And I think that, like, the whole purpose of standard base is that a goal of a grade level standard is to master it by the end of your year. So when you tell a parent, hey, it's the end of the first quarter, they haven't mastered it. That's not a bad thing. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to grow with time. So it's almost it's a disservice to tell a parent that you've mastered something that you haven't just to get a green circle.
Right, I agree with that.
Any concerns with the proposed language on elementary report card? That takes us to header of enrollment in classes, page 11. Basically referring to the fully online courses and added language for clarity. Obviously, the fee part was struck through. Early graduation, we talked about that this past spring a little bit, and with the failed referendum. We have a lot of opportunities here in Tri Creek, and we want to encourage our kids to stay here unless it's an extraordinary opportunity. And I used the Drake Bowen as the example, who graduated midterm and immediately went to Notre Dame and started playing baseball and was playing football now. So
Yeah.
that's extraordinary.
Yep.
We have an application process, so a lot of that verbiage that was in the handbook, we just transferred to the application. So anyone who's interested, they can get the application and see what the requirements are in that venue. Homework, we already talked about, so we're just looking at removing that. If we don't practice it, then we probably shouldn't put in there as an expectation. That takes us to drugs, tobacco, and paraphernalia. That really, the word derivatives was added for clarity with vaping. And you can see the next one, vapes, was specifically added. That takes us to the cell phones, digital and electronic communications. We had discussion about this at previous board meetings. I don't know that we talked as much about the K-5, but apparently there were some issues with kids having it in their possession, and they just want them to be put away and not on their person.
So I feel like that should then say something similar, and I think Deb's email said that too, to what the middle school policy is, because it may not be in the student's possession, but then says must be put away during the day, almost is contradictory. Like, I read it to say, well, they can't come to school with it, but it has to be put away.
Yeah.
Which I agree, it needs to be put away. I feel like that's a confusing-
So the difference, the clarity is some were viewing as put away in my pocket. Put away in my hoodie pocket.
Which would be the same as what we're doing with the middle school, right?
Yeah, so elementaries, they have cubbies, but they're not lockable. But, so I'm processing this out in real time. So then where are they gonna put it away?
Their backpack.
It would be their desk, their backpack,
Not their desk.
right.
So their backpack.
So would it be, so it wouldn't be assigned locker?
No. But doesn't Lake Prairie have lockers?
We don't, they don't have locks on theirs.
Well,
So I'm going back to the language. If we didn't have the added language, cell phones must be turned off and must be put away during the school day.
They're gonna ask, what does put away mean?
yeah.
And by adding the new language, it's just clear, cannot be on that person. You're saying, well, they could put it away in a desk, but should they just put it in a backpack or a locker?
I feel like it should be put away in the backpack. Just like we're telling the middle schoolers, and I get to lock it in their locker, If I'm taking the risk of letting my K through 5 student go with their cell phone, I obviously know it's not getting locked up. And I would say most of the parents don't want their kids having it on them throughout class. I just give it to him for bus ride purposes once he gets home. So, I don't know, it's not a major deal, but it was something that came up for me, and also Deb mentioned it in hers as well. It should mirror, or be more specific than to say where it belongs. Because we don't want it in their desk.
And that'd still be in their possession if they were sitting at their desk, right? Theoretically.
And along the same lines, I'm carrying my backpack and my cell phone's in my backpack, so technically it's in my possession.
But don't they have to put their backpacks up?
Yeah,
They
I
don't
mean,
have them with them by their desks.
honestly, I don't know what every classroom and
Might
the
keep
grade
it by the
bands
desk.
might be different, like I
Okay.
can't speak to that, I'm just trying to address the concern. How would we rephrase this?
It makes sense as we talk through it, but
I hate to make a unilateral decision without getting input from our teachers, I think that's just a.
Why don't you just put an asterisk next to it so that you know that you need to talk about it?
and I think even if we just maybe flipped it, cell phones must be turned off, must be put away during the school day, and not in the student's possession.
And then it's kind of up to the teacher discretion as,
To
is
where
that
she-
put away in a backpack, is it put away in the locker? I don't know that
Right.
at this level I care.
Right.
Right.
Alright, so, let me do it, cell phones must be turned off, put away. And may not be in the student's possession during the school day.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Thank you. I'm just gonna do one last reading. Cell phones must be turned off, put away, and may not be in the student's possession during the school day. Okay.
Perfect.
We good with the 6-8 language?
Yeah.
Smartwatches and Bluetooth technologies. We've added smartwatch terminology to make sure that we're very clear. Testing sessions, that comes from the testing regulators, so we added that for clarity. And then the Bluetooth technologies in the middle school. This AirPods are becoming an issue, and it just falls in line with consistency with the cell phone, and so middle school is pretty adamant, their staff's on board, like, we just need to be done with it during the school day. Dress code, this is something else the board wrestled with a little bit. The hats and hoods and coverings worn on the head would not permitted as K-8, except on the acceptable spirit days. And then for grades 9 through 12, hats, excluding hoods, are permitted to be worn during the school day unless removal is necessary due to safety protocols or interference with learning.
Okay.
We're good with that?
Yep.
The drugs, tobacco, and paraphernalia, this language was added here. It does appear elsewhere in the handbook, and it requests to just pair it up with the offense to improve communication. See something, say something. At the time that we printed our handbooks last year, we were not fully launched with the Sandy Hook Promise. Since then, we've got all of the details, and we felt like it's just appropriate to put it in the handbook. Student fees, as you know, we needed to modify according to state law. It's still, if there are fees that are assessed for the permitted items, basically still says parents are obligated to pay that, or the school district has the right to go to collections. Withdrawal from school. This was primarily regarding textbook rental, and let's say a parent at the beginning of the school year paid the full textbook rental fee, but then moved after the first quarter, that would entitle the parent to a prorated refund. Since we no longer have those fees, a lot of that language became irrelevant, and so what you're left with was just the process about withdrawing and turning in any school property. The bus rules of 16 and 17 were added at the request of the Transportation Department to bring clarity to, obviously, issues that they deal
I'm
with.
surprised those weren't in there already.
Student drivers, again, added clarity that they are subject to random drug testing if they have a parking permit.
Why are we doing that?
Driving and parking at school is a privilege, and so it falls under the extracurricular privilege.
Why are we drug testing our students?
We are drug testing our students because it's a deterrent for kids to not use drugs and to not use those privileges.
And also that if you do catch them using drugs, you can offer them some type of support.
I'll give you a personal testimony. My wife called me one day, a couple years ago, and said that our daughter was selected for a random drug test, and she was really upset about it. I said, "What are you upset about? Like, why not? Wouldn't we as parents want to know if our kid is subject to that?" So from a parent perspective, I think that's probably a good thing. From a student perspective, I think it also, some kids might like it because it's an out for them for peer pressure. Hey, no, I'm not going to do that because I like playing basketball and I'm not going to jeopardize my status of playing basketball.
Well, I can see it for athletics. I mean, we want to make sure our athletes
Yeah.
are with the health issues and things like that. Like, I can understand that, but this is even, random drug testing is a part of our handbook as well for our student body.
We don't drug test the kids unless they're in ECA or sports or drivers. We don't drug test, just break,
Okay,
for students.
okay.
It really just falls under the concept of it's a privilege, and that practice seems to work for the privileges of extracurricular activities, and it's extended then to the privilege of driving to school.
I think it's a wonderful idea as a deterrent for the kids. And if they want to drive, which is a big thing for teenagers, they know that they have to be clean, and to know that any given moment you could be tested is a big deterrent. I support it 200%.
It is something in the business world that is going away due to the legalizing of marijuana in all nearby areas. So it's something, I think it's a point of discussion, maybe not for this year, but at a later time, a point of discussion. Because that is something that, again, they might experiment and they might have that in their system if they get picked for a random drug test. And are we out trying to be the police, or are we trying to be the educators? So
But it's also based
I have
on making good
questions about it.
choices.
Yeah, I
Taking
agree.
marijuana's on
And
that list.
would you want your child operating a vehicle
I
if
guess
they were
that's
under
what I-
influence?
No,
Legal
but
now.
a drug test isn't gonna tell me that if
Correct,
they
but
didn't,
then
they're
that's
gonna tell me if
same
they
as
smoked
alcohol,
marijuana
tobacco.
2 weeks
It's
ago.
under the
It's not gonna tell me that they
Right.
were driving under the influence.
Right, but it'll give you a
But
hint if they
that's-
go to school and then they tested positive. that
That's a
would
longer
indicate that
conversation
they
than
were
what we're gonna
operating
have right now.
I'm not fully against it, I just wanna explore it a little and make sure
Yeah,
that we're talking
there's-
about the points.
I agree, there's another conversation for that, but that's gonna be a longer one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have some answers.
So we're good for the moment for this
Yes.
school year?
Yeah, I
Okay.
just would like to explore it later.
Yeah.
Late buses, this came up at our district-wide meeting, and it was unanimous, it does not need to be in our handbook.
Perfect.
Student drivers, so I don't know that this well, actually, it may be an annual thing. There's an FFA event where the board is approached to afford FFA members to drive their tractor to school on each day. This really just, let's stop coming to the board every year for approval and give that discretion to the building principal.
Where was that when I was in high school?
During the normal school year, I could see on the last day they do it.
I got turned
It's for
around.
that,
Really?
it's for that day, it's
Yeah.
just, that's what this line is in here for, is that day when they do drive your tractors.
Okay, I thought one day, you know, it's expected, I know that.
2 years in a row I got turned around.
Fire department, police would escort.
Bunch of
them.
crap.
Yeah.
It's fun.
We're just making it more user.
But one day a year, the last day, not tomorrow they're gonna come.
Well, I think it happened in April one year, and
It coincides
You know,
with Spirit Week.
when you work with the principal, make sure you park the
Right.
tractor here and not here, and, yeah,
I
it's a
think
fun.
one day,
Maybe the certain size of the tractor.
Not a
Maybe,
combine.
maybe it's a competition.
Don't be driving your quad track to school.
Are you good with this?
Yeah.
I am.
Student drivers, students who violate the Indian school stop arm. That's, again, just for clarity.
So why are we disciplining them on top of what the police would already be doing?
Because it's a chronic problem and they're on their way to school when they do it.
So we're seeing a lot of stop arms by high school drivers.
I would say a lot by high school, not necessarily. A lot in general, yes. High school kids are part of that, yes.
And are they getting citations from
Yeah.
the police department?
Mhm.
What if their parents do it?
If their parent does it,
They're getting a citation, right?
yeah.
So do we need to be duly punishing them at the school? I just wonder what the rationale is.
I think it's a legit concern. I mean, it really boils down to the concept of double punishment. I mean, if the board isn't for that, we can take that out. I don't know if they're but a handful or less of instances that student drivers do this.
I just
So,
wanna make sure we're not double.
I think we could
But
live,
that's, I don't know what you guys think.
I mean, we can certainly alter it right now if that's the sentiment of,
I don't know, I struggle, I agree with Katie, it's kind of like a double punishment that maybe not necessary, but at the same time, I'm thinking about it, you know,
It's
if my
big
kid
deal.
ran through that, and I found out that he ran through that, not only would he get his ticket, but then my foot would,
But not
Be
if
in a
the
certain
parents
spot.
like you, and I agree that operating a vehicle, especially at a young age, they need to be responsible and follow the rules. And again, our whole intention is to prepare them to be successful citizens once they get past high school. And I think, you know, again, if it saves one kid from running through that stop sign, because, oh, if I do this, not only am I gonna get a ticket, my parents gonna kick my butt, and I'm gonna lose my privileges, or whatever we're talking about, I think that's good, I like that. I'm old fashioned and, you know, I believe in that.
so it could be quadruple punishment. I get the
Parents,
citation,
the parent.
I get the tardy punishment for being late, I then get the consequence for the violation, and then I get in trouble with the parent.
But
We're not the parents and we're not the police,
Right.
so I
It's
just
a
wanna
big-
make sure we were watching that.
it's a big responsibility to operate a vehicle safely, and the price for violating that responsibility should be high.
So, we are happy to remove the double punishment, so to speak, and maybe track this more and come back in a year when we reassess and say, hey, look, these are the numbers, these are the instances. We can leave it in here. It's really, you can see as a superintendent,
I don't know, I say leave it in there.
I say leave it.
I mean, I don't know, that's one of those things that, as a young, you really need to know, like that, I mean, we obviously, you know the news, and that's you go around a stop arm and you hit somebody, that's something you can't take back ever.
Yeah.
So
It's
that,
like
to me,
going
is a
for a red
little,
light.
yeah.
some of those videos that we watch, they can get scary.
Yeah,
You hear the bus drivers scream
yeah.
because of near misses.
Yeah.
Okay.
So to me, yeah, that's one of those things that, yeah.
So this is a summary of changes that would be made, that we're looking for approval for the student handbook.
Do they have to, oh crap, what did I do?
That's just a minute. So then we need to
Uh.
vote to approve?
Oh, yeah. Real quick question though, do they have to apply for a parking permit each year, right, to get it? I think that needs to be a little sign up there when they apply for that or something, so they know about that.
Oh, it's
You-
not a bad idea.
You know, just so they,
I'm sure
I
they
mean, but, I mean, also a deterrent for them not to be doing that. Cause,
We used to have.
I don't know,
like, a
stop arm
separate-
violations kinda piss me off, so.
We used to have a separate, like, sheet that we would get with the parking rules and privileges.
They probably still do.
So maybe they have
I
that
just-
and can add it to that. And you can sign it, like, it was very obvious.
Right.
Yeah,
Right, you're aware.
Mhm, yeah.
alright, have a motion and a second. We need any more discussion? All in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion passes. All right, technology. Authorize the administration to declare specific outdated technology equipment and supplies as surplus and authorize the disposal of said surplus and outdated technology equipment and supplies.
Make a motion?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yes, I'd like to compliment Mr. Blackman on his thorough explanation of what was going on, including pictures. I was very surprised. Thank you.
Say, you can also thank Mr. Bessich at the high school because that is our video studio equipment. So he did a very thorough analysis of everything and has already offered it up to some other schools that have some interest. So hopefully we'll get some funding back for that.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Win-win.
He needs an attaboy, Mr. Message.
That's the third time tonight his name has come up in the positive.
Alrighty. All in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Where am I at? Public comment for, no, wait, yep, that's it. Public comment for non-related items, we don't have any. On-site registration for students who are new to the district will take place Monday, July 31st at each school from 12 noon till 7 p.m. Our next meeting will be Thursday, August 10th. Anything else?
I just want to express my gratitude to this board because I think we have really good, genuine, and authentic conversation, and we're doing the real work of the school district, and it's not artificial, and just appreciate the honesty and authenticity of it.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
I like it.